Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of The Pivot. We want to say thank you to the city of Austin for helping to back this programming. Also, the Economic Development Department, the Cultural Arts Division, and of course, the team over at the African American Culture and Heritage Facility. Episode 2 is titled The Art of Storytelling. Most people are pretty familiar with that song title by the legendary group Outkast, but we are going to talk about the art of storytelling with one of my favorite historians, Black orators to tell our story, Javier Wallace. So I want you all to welcome him and just want to say thank you for taking the time, Javier, out of your schedule to join us. You know, I know you have a lot of things that you could be doing, so we greatly appreciate your time.
No, most definitely. Thank you, TJ. Thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share this space with everybody who's listening. So good evening or good day from whatever time zone you're tuned in. And I hope we can have a pretty in-depth discussion tonight.
For sure. It's going to be a great conversation. I've been excited about this episode since we first started lining up our themes for each episode since the birth of the pivot. So now that we're in episode 2, we're in the kind of the winding down phase of Black History Month, but want to make sure that we really tell Austin's Black history with a lot of inclusion, right? And I know one word that's a hot button for the both of us is perspective. So with that being said, I think the first question is that let us know, how did you begin telling Austin's history from a Black perspective? And what kind of, I guess, got you into it? What kind of fueled you and pushed you in that direction?
Well, I'm definitely have to go with, I think it is a legacy that I was born into, you know, with my family here in Austin, particularly. You know, we always had, like, during family events, but particularly during the Christmas time, we always had Kwanzaa events. And my aunt, who passed away, Miss Effie Hill Franklin, or Jackie, as she was widely known, always made it very known that we have to know our history and where we come from within the Kwanzaa celebration. So knowing my history was something that has always been a part of just my everyday growing up, number one. But then as far as telling it in public spaces the way I'm doing it now, I really have to attribute that to when I was living in Panama, where my dad is from, and starting a business centered around travel and tourism and history as well, with my co-founder, Afro Latinx Travel, where we looked at the center of the Black history experiences of people of African descent in that area. So when I came back to Austin to start my PhD at the University of Texas here in town, it was something that I was doing since 2015. And I felt like there was a good space for me to come into here in Austin and really tell our stories to the public, and talk about our contributions, to talk about all the systemic things that happen that have placed us at disadvantages at times, but the strategic things that Black people have done to counter all of those very strategic measures that keep us in very stipulated or subjective places. So it was just, just the natural flow of things, how I was working with my business previously before Panama, and recognizing that I'm from here and there's a large story that I felt could be told that centered Black people. And it led me to start Black Austin Tours in February 2019, doing in-person tours.
So being the owner and CEO of Black Austin Tours and doing it in a very unique way, which is a walking tour, let me make sure I bring that up, is that, you actually get a chance to see, touch, and feel a lot of these landmarks that where you connect the stories and the narratives as you go along the tour, which I think is very, very, very important. I know in our previous conversation, we were talking about the retelling of Austin's history, and we talked about the importance of perspective. If you don't mind, please elaborate a little bit on that and just kind of give us kind of your point of view and some insight on how perspective is so important when it comes down to telling Austin's history.
Yeah, most definitely. I think perspective is almost it all, because I think perspective really defines how the story is told and how we're forced to think about the story. And I think oftentimes within Austin's history, Texas history, U.S. history, or history at large, it has been told from a very certain perspective. And many times, that mainstream perspective is a white perspective. And when it's told from a perspective, it's told from that viewpoint, from the lens of the people and how they experience it. So when I bring in perspective, I try to bring in a Black perspective on Austin, in Austin's history, because that can completely change the entire story. Because we're telling it from the person's, from a perspective of how people experience. And I always, like one example that I usually give is thinking about like the state capitol building, right? People tell us that the state capitol building is a sign of victory in Texas independence. You know, I'm like, who? For who? Right.
Right.
My perspective, knowing that it was constructed using materials that were from Black men, women, and children that were incarcerated, you know, horribly, unjustly, and being a descendant of individuals like that, that perspective changes for me. And I like to tell it from that, being very frank with history, but then also finding ways to give humanity to those people who were dehumanized, because I'm of that community. So when we talk from a perspective, it really changes, and we can really think about history differently when we hear things from other people's perspective.
No, I totally understand where you're coming from, and to your point, specifically geared around the Capitol being built. We do have a photo at the African American Culture and Heritage Facility, which depicts that, and really it's probably one of our most polarizing photos at the facility, and folks love to just kind of have conversations about just kind of post-slavery, how that kind of burden kind of fell upon the states, and they came up with the system to help make sure that things are still getting done, right? And that photo is a great depiction of that. So. No, I thank you for bringing that point up. Another thing that I was thinking about is that Austin has a huge growth in population of folks that come from all over the United States and truthfully all over the world, right? And I know a big part of what we do is that we provide points for people to be able to connect with the culture here in Austin and try to do that in the most inclusive way as possible. And I think one thing that a lot of people do not really know about is really speaking to the 1928 City of Austin Master Plan, right? And if you don't mind, if you can, please just provide a little bit of a quick background on the 1928 City Master Plan and how you feel some of those repercussions are still felt within Austin until this day.
Yeah. Well, the 1928 Master Plan of the City of Austin, the legendary 1928 plan, is one where Austin is trying to figure out how to control and manage growth in the city. Austin is defining itself as a city, and what is Austin known for, particularly the things that we're known for today in 2021, almost like this Silicon Hills, technology, education, green spaces. So Austin is really trying to define itself in this plan and how to manage growth in the city. And one of the challenges that Austin is encountering is the spatial distribution of Black people throughout the city, and how the spatial distribution of Black people dispersed throughout the city is serving as challenges to Austin reaching its goal. So now Austin wants to deal with the segregation issue that in the plan, they talk about around the nation. Many cities are dealing with this issue of segregation and how to deal particularly with a Black community. Mm-hmm. And Austin, the answer that Austin gives, or the solution, is to create a Negro district where Black people who are spatially dispersed throughout the city will be forced into living in a Negro district, which we now know as East Austin, I guess in most current language, Central East Austin now. I think that's what the old language is. East Austin, or the East there, right? So this 6 square mile district where African Americans are forced to live, where they supposedly are receiving everything that will be denied. outside of this space: light, water, basic utility services, education consolidated in these spaces. So it's this creation of a Black district in Austin that is in the side of town that has a Black population historically. It's also the side of town where the limited industry that's left in the city is heavily located, so it might not be the safest place in the city to be. And it's the place that many, not all, but many African Americans in the city of Austin have to call home and do make home. But it's the intended consequences still are with us today, because that segregation, that displacement, that lack of resources and services at the state or the city level continues to play themselves out in many negative ways in this city as we have progressed since 1928 as a community, in the different things that have happened. So, housing, the lack of concentrated poverty in certain places that are still with us within Austin and the district today, even as things rapidly change. So maybe that's one thing I could note quickly that people will resonate.
I totally agree with everything that you just stated. I think to kind of put it in a real like streamlined sentence is that most people, to make them understand what the 1928 master plan was about, was, even if you were a millionaire, and if you were Black, and if you wanted to live outside of the 6 square mile district, you would not be able to receive any city services. So it wasn't about, how wealthy you were, or even, how well educated you were, or none of that mattered when that 1928 city plan went into implementation. And like you were saying, when it came down to the allocation of a lot of the city services, they were allocated based on the creation of some of those districts and how some of those funds were allocated towards some of the infrastructure, the pipes, the drainage systems, things of that nature, which are super, super, super important when it comes down to community growth, and I think it's important to be able to start there. To start use it as a starting point to really understand that what city government was doing as far as moving certain, populations around the city. So thank you for bringing all those points up and connecting them for us. It's greatly appreciated. I want to, at this time, introduce Harrison Eppright, who's going to join us. He is one of our highly esteemed orators as well, and want to be able to get his perspective on some of these topics as well. So Harrison, I was just asking Javier about the 1928 city plan, and he did a great job at kind of giving us a summary about what it's about, or how it was implemented, I should say. If you don't mind, please share some of your thoughts on the 1928 city plan as well.
Great. Don't mind if I do. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. Yes, I'm Harrison Eppright, and Javier, I heard what you said. I agreed with it 100%. Also, I want to add to that, and you touched on this also, that in formulating the 1928 master plan, this was a new thing. Austin was trying to be in the forefront of innovative city planning. And so Austin was one of the first cities in Texas, certainly one of the first in the nation, and one of the first in Texas to come up with a master plan. And the master plan was devised by a firm out of Dallas called Koch and Fowler, Koch and Fowler. And this would be a way that the master plan would call for things that we associate with master plans, like improved sewage, improved infrastructure, well, also and new schools, just to name a few things. Well, in improving the infrastructure of Austin, it was decided that, well, Austin had to do something about its the Negro question, as they called it back in those days, the Negro question. And how do you deal with the Negro question and segregate these people and do it in such a way that would be that would cause the least amount of damage? Now, also, at the time that this was going on in 1928, we must remember too that Texas, as well as the South, and really much of the United States, was racially segregated, racially and ethnically segregated. And Austin was no exception. But you had situations where, let's say, even in Austin, you had situations where blacks and whites lived, if not side by side, they lived within striking distance of each other. That was certainly the case here in Austin with the establishment of the freedmen's communities after the Civil War, when blacks, the newly freed African Americans, got together and established communities in order to put their lives back together, in order to look for those who had been separated due to slavery or by war, and also to start businesses, build community. So there were at least 20 freedmen's communities in and around Austin. There already were some freedmen's communities even in East Austin. I mean, witness the fact that Samuel Houston College and Tillotson Institute, two separate African American schools, were established in East Austin during and in the aftermath of Reconstruction. They were already in East Austin, and they were in freedmen's communities, evidence that there was a Black population already in East Austin. But in addition to Blacks in East Austin, there was the Swedish community, Swede Hill or Swedish Hill. You had Germans, you had Lebanese, you had Mexicans living in the community, you had the Texas State Cemetery in the community, the Arlington Cemetery of Texas, Oakwood Cemetery, the oldest cemetery in the city. But you also had Blacks who were dispersed throughout Austin in freedmen's communities, including downtown Austin. There was a thriving freedmen's community that once existed along Red River Street, like between Red River and what is now East 8th Street, and let's say Red River and East Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, or just a little before that. What is evidence of that community today is that at the corner of East 11th and Red River, you have this triangular shaped house, tri-cornered, two-story structure. Well, that is now the offices of the Austin Symphony Orchestra. But originally, that was a home. That was a home for Jeremiah Hamilton. Jeremiah Hamilton was one of the Blacks who once served in the Texas legislature during Reconstruction. And this home anchored a once thriving Black community right there in downtown Austin, within walking distance to the Texas State Capitol. At the time that the community existed, it existed prior to the construction of the new state capitol. It existed while the old state capitol building was standing. The old state capitol building was completed in 1853 with slave labor, 1853, served as our state capitol until the fire in 1881 that burned the old state capitol. And then the new state capitol building, our present capitol, was built in part with, yes, convict labor. And yes, you are so right. There were many, many photos taken of African Americans working on the old state capitol building, and a famous photo of the African Americans and whites standing around the Goddess of Liberty statue before the Goddess of Liberty was hoisted to the very top of the Capitol dome. Very striking, very interesting picture. And perhaps even some of those Blacks, I mean, many of them were convicts, unfortunately. There may have been a few Blacks, though, who lived in that community near Red River Street. Wesley, what is now Wesley United Methodist Church, started out in that community at about East 9th and Trinity. It was known for many years as Old Wesley on the Hill. Wesley, which was formed in 1865. Well, Wesley moved by freed blacks, moved into their first permanent structure in 1882 at East 9th and Trinity Street. And it was known as Old Wesley on the Hill. And that's where Wesley was until Wesley followed the move to East Austin in 1929 to their present imposing structure, beautiful edifice that stands at the corner. It stands in San Bernard Street, which, by the way, that is in the National Register. But yes. I know I get off on these little tangents.
No, you're good, Harrison. That was actually a great point, and it was actually a good way for me to segue into this next question, and it kind of takes us to the next point in our conversation. Is that I know when a lot of people talk about the 1928 city plan, they also speak about it from a very negative place or point of view. And it does have some aspects of some things that we know weren't right or just, or maybe when it comes down to equity or just living in a humanistic way, that it kind of tilted the scale, right?
Yes.
We can all admit to that. But there also were some things that happened as a result of the 1928 city plan that a lot of folks didn't really expect. And one of them was the microeconomy that was created within the African-American Culture and Heritage District, right? And there were some cornerstones that were there that really helped to sustain the whole entire district. And that's what a lot of people, I think, may not really know, is that when you came into that African-American Culture and Heritage Districts, otherwise known as the 6 Square District, that it was fully sustaining, so you could get everything done. All of your needs were met within the district. So Javier, if you don't mind, maybe talk about some of those economic cornerstones of the district.
Yeah, most definitely. And just as I come in, thank you for allowing me to share the space with you, Mr. Eppright. I'm a huge fan. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I will be remiss if I didn't mention that before coming on.
So I want to talk to you. You're fantastic. Yes, sir.
Oh no, thank you. Thank you. We will talk. So to get to the question, TJ, I think one. This is me. Now this is me. I have to say it.
You get a bit biased.
There's a lot of. I think that the 1928 master plan was a complete negative consequence overall. That's just me, and but I know I'm going to the point that you're making. But I think like the strategic displacement of people with malintent initially stated, even though it might have been painted as something being beneficial to Black people, African Americans, I think that subversely that there was a lot of malintent in that entire plan, and we continue to live the negative of those consequences. But with that being said, I think when people are forced to have to do something, I think a testament that we can bring out of this is when Black people have been forced to do anything Black people always have, and one of those things is an economy that grew out of this district that they had to. And I think, it reached every aspect of life within the district, every aspect of life. I think some of the things that I like to highlight, particularly like when I do my walking tours, is I've been enamored, if you will, with like the Deluxe Hotel on Navasota, Rosewood, and 11th Street. Like when I found out about that, I've been enamored, because I think I deal with travel a lot and tourism. I just love looking at the old picture and knowing that these Black people had an entire hotel where wherever you were coming from around the nation, if you were coming into Austin, this was a place that you could come and rest. And the other places that were also mentioned, like in the Negro, the Green Book, right? There's the Green Book. When you look at the old books from the 40s and 50s and 60s, there's always a couple places here in Austin, not as detailed like San Antonio. Like San Antonio has some stuff, but we always had a couple things listed here in Austin. And it just really shows. And some of these buildings are still here, by the way. Mm-hmm. Some of them are personal homes now, have been through many different phases, and people have big walls up around some of these homes. One of them in particular, that doesn't seem as welcoming and inviting as it once was as a business when it was there. I love the fact that the people operated homes as businesses in many instances. That once, and that was and that is something that spurred out of the 1928 plan and negatively impacted Black people once the city of Austin decided to move past the neglect that was happening. The Harlem taxi service is another business that I love to always think about. And where I get most of these businesses from, if anybody has a chance to go like the Houston Tillotson and go to the archives and look at the yearbooks, the older yearbooks, and look at the back. So the back of the yearbooks that have the businesses that are supporting the production of the yearbook and giving like money to the graduating class or congratulations, you just see so many businesses that are located inside the district. I mean, the pharmacies that are that like the Hillside Pharmacy, ice cream shops, the taxi services, beauty shops. I mean, everything is listed, and that has been one of my favorite things to do is sit in the HT archives and just look at the backs of the yearbooks and see the amount of businesses that were there. And I mean, of course, I hear stories of people who lived during those times that will talk about it. But it has done something to me to put pictures with names and things I never knew about. And the entire economy was flourishing. I just gave out a couple examples like these.
No, I was even thinking about the Harlem Theater. Yeah, I was thinking about the Harlem Theater, right? I mean, the fact that the Harlem Theater was, a Black-owned theater within the city.
I attended the Harlem Theater on Saturdays when I was a child.
Yeah,
I went to the Harlem quite a bit and had my hair cut at Marshall's Barber Shop,
for sure.
Which was started by Mr. Ira Marshall, who was a distant cousin of mine on my dad's side, Mr. Marshall. I remember there used to be Sweet Cleaners located on East 12th Street as well. In fact, East 12th Street and East 11th Street were both considered part of Black downtown back in the day.
Yes, no, you're absolutely correct. I mean, and just to kind of even further cement that point, my great uncle Leo Jones owned Jones Barbershop. So just right, down the street from Downs Field. So I know exactly where you're coming from, and I love the fact that we're actually bringing up real intangible businesses that people can kind of look up, they can see, and they can really do a lot of research to just talk about how these businesses really sustained East Austin. And I think that it just shows just the connective tissue within community, and that when you come together, there's not a lot that you cannot accomplish. I will say this: I think one thing we kind of have talked about, some of the economic development. I think one thing that really does kind of go unnoticed is the superior education system that was happening within the district as well. So I know that Harrison, you kind of did touch on, those early days in the creation of HT. But if you don't mind, kind of just talk about just some of the cohesion between the community and the education system, from L.C. Anderson to, Blackshear to Keeling, a lot of these schools that have been around that really have played an integral part on really kind of just being that anchor, that educational anchor, to the African-American community in the cultural district specifically.
Certainly. Thank you. Well, historically, both Samuel Houston College and first Tillotson Institute, later Tillotson College, both of those schools trained young people to become teachers. We forget that that the backbone of the Black educational system in the South consisted of Black teachers who were trained many times in predominantly Black institutions. Not to say that there were no teachers trained in northern institutions. No. In fact, many a summer, some of these teachers would go off to northern schools to further their education and then come back to the South. So you never had too much education. You were looking for ways to improve yourself. So both Samuel Houston College and Tillotson College also had school departments. Well, even Tillotson once had a high school department. I even think that Samuel Houston once had a little high school, kind of a high school prep school department as well. And also, too, these schools also stressed, in the case of Samuel Houston, I think Samuel Houston stressed more of an industrial education, training blacks for skills for trades, kind of like the Booker T. Washington model of education. And Tillotson was more kind of a mixture of liberal arts as well as industrial education. And something else too about these schools as well, in that in the case of Tillotson, for sure, some of the buildings, at least two of the buildings that are on the campus of the combined now Houston-Tillotson University campus, well, two of those buildings were built in part with student labor, reflecting the Booker T. Washington model of industrial education. And
Yes.
these two buildings were constructed at the time until when before the schools merged, when they were two separate institutions, and Tillotson was one institution, Samuel Houston was another. By the way, Tillotson Institute was located on where it is now, Bluebonnet Hill. And Bluebonnet Hill, you could see all the way to the lower Colorado River, now Lady Bird Lake back in the day. And Samuel Houston College was situated over at the corners of what is now I-35 and the frontage road of I-35 and East 12th Street. Back in the day, the frontage road of I-35 was called East Avenue. There was no Interstate Highway 35.
Yeah.
So these two thriving schools were looked on with pride in the community, and they were supported by blacks in the community, and they were also supported by whites outside of the community as well. In fact, what is not known, and this is something that I came across, that most of the buildings that were on the campus of Samuel Houston were designed by an architect named John Andrew Wartha, who was Welsh, and he designed many of the buildings that once stood on the campus of Samuel Houston College. Most of his work, unfortunately, Andrew Wartha's work is gone. Over on the campus of Tillotson, their main building, Allen Hall, was designed by Jasper Preston. Jasper Preston was a white architect. Jasper Preston's best known design is the Driscoll Hotel in downtown Austin. That it was believed that Colonel Jesse Lincoln Driscoll was so impressed with what Jasper Preston had done over on the campus of Tillotson, this little black campus, that he hired him to design the Driscoll Hotel, which opened 1886.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
I know as we talk about Austin and its growth and some of these architects that kind of had their imprint as far as some of the buildings that were constructed over the years, one thing that a lot of people really don't think about is Austin's connection to the arts, especially within the district. I know a lot of folks know about the Victory Grill, and they know about, kind of how that was a part of the growth and the evolution and how much of a mainstay it was when it came down to the famed Chitlin circuit. But would love, Javier, to get some of your thoughts on that and kind of share some stories that you may know about the Victory Grill and of course, opening up to Harrison as well.
Well, so art in general or just the music and Victory Grill?
Well, I know music is one aspect, but you can go so many different directions with it. So, I mean, as far as just some of the acts, and I think just to kind of make it a little bit more identifiable for the music portion, and then, feel free to talk about some of those other venues where a lot of famed artists have kind of poured into the Austin ecosystem when it comes down to arts.
Well, let me say this. This is one thing you got to know about me. If you ever come on a tour with me, I tell people this all the time. I'm a little bit rock and roll. I'm a little bit ridiculous. So, and I always tell people, look, we can't, if we're going to talk about Austin and music history, we're not going to start with neither Stevie Ray Vaughan nor Willie Nelson. Sorry.
No.
It's not going to happen.
Amen to that.
So I say all that to say, we're not having an honest conversation if we're not talking about Black contributions within the scene. You know what I mean? Like the blues. The blues comes with centuries of forced oppression based off of millenniums of Black traditions in the motherland. Stevie Ray don't come from that. We come from that. You see what I'm saying? So when I say that, I want us to know that it's important to highlight every freedom community that Mr. Eppright has brought up, and every church that was centered in those communities that had a choir. That had a choir. And every man, woman that sung in the choirs, and every deacon and deaconess that led praise and devotionals, that led people like Blues Boy Hubbard to come up with these tunes, that influenced people like Lavelle White to sing in these places on the Chitlin circuit. If we're not being honest about that history, we're not talking about real life in Austin. So I think in the Chitlin circuit, in these places where individuals like the ones I mentioned were able to have a stage, however small or big it was, and people not only, I mean, we really know, his name just escaped me, who opened the Victory Grill. Wow, it like really, Johnny Holmes.
Johnny Holmes.
Yes. Johnny Holmes, right. We know individuals like Johnny Holmes existed, and we know other people existed that didn't have the same platform or access to funds like Johnny Holmes to open these spaces for people to come and perform, and this is true, right? Places even like Doris Miller Auditorium were places where concerts were being held, dances were being held. What my uncle likes to call, he said, was no West Austin music going on over. That's my uncle. That's not me. That's him. There's no West Austin music was happening in that space. So I think when we think about like the Chitlin circuit, we have so much to talk about in so many places that I don't even know. Because my same uncle, he talks about, he like, man, you young, and I am young, comparatively speaking, by the way. But he was like, young kids don't know anything. All y'all know is 6th Street. I'm like, that's true. And he's like, you got to imagine he said 11th Street and Rosewood used to look like 6th Street.
Yes.
Full of only Black people. Right. I don't know anything like that. Not even during Old Texas Relay Weekend. I didn't know anything about that. So I think, we have to be honest. There were so many establishments that were open in East Austin that catered to Black people, Afrocentric events that gave Black people a safe space to congregate and have fun and practice their craft, hone their crafts, and show it to the world. And that was inclusive of national artists who were in town and maybe playing in segregated venues in West Austin, or where African Americans were largely barred from going. They had these places, Black-owned spaces, Chitlin Circuit. And when I say Chitlin Circuit, I give them the same legitimacy as any owner in West Austin that provides these spaces for African Americans, national acts to perform in front of local crowds. And I think just art in general, and the last thing I'll say about art, because I love like the everyday aesthetic, and I mentioned this today, right now, talking about beauty shops and barbershops, the everyday aesthetic and the everyday artists that lived in the district. Like my grandfather opened Ideal Barbershop in 1948, and it's still open, Mr. Leonard Hill. And, they were a part of the Texas Tonsorial Artists Association, Texas Association of Tonsorial Artists. They had women barbers, there were men barbers, they had balls, they had all these large galas, and they were trained artists.
Oh, yeah.
Musicians are trained artists.
Yes.
And somebody who, we really take pride in our aesthetic as a people holistically. And I like to attribute that to many different things, but I think we have to add that to the artists that are here. And the last thing I say, I'm raging, but one thing about art is the mural. I love Creation Soldier, and I was blessed yesterday to meet John Fisher, who painted the mural. And we need to give that individual the credit while he is here with us. I walk among John Fisher every day. He is a maintenance worker at the University of Texas at Austin. And I asked him, does anybody know who you are over there? He said, nobody knows who I am. I said, that's crazy. And this is a mural that has been there longer than I've been alive, that talks about our experience in Austin, Texas. And this And this great artist walks among us every day. And his college senior project that he wasn't able to finish at Texas Southern University, it transformed itself into what I say is the most iconic mural in this city, if not this state, that deals with Black people, our experiences from 1492 or before to 2021, including the creation of the Negro District. I would love for us to be able to find a way to honor and lift him up and recognize the work that he's done as an artist in this community.
Well, maybe he can be a future guest. Right?
I hope so.
Yeah. So I know that we're getting deep into the hour, gentlemen, but I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the community for you just giving your time to participate in this episode of The Pivot. And before we go, you got to promise to keep it short. All right. But I'm going to give you an opportunity to go ahead and share one quick fact about Austin that you would want the community to know. It can be something within the district or without, but it has to be just one fact. Okay. And it has to be quick. All right. Harrison, you can start since Javier answered the last question.
Okay, then. All right, then. Let me see. I just want to say, I love Austin history, period. I love all ethnicities, all of the history.
Yes.
I'm very, very privileged that I am able to show how Black Austin history is an integral part of Austin's history.
Yes.
It is not just our history. It is the city's history as well. The fact that in East Austin, so many people think there's nothing there anymore. There's plenty of there in plain sight in East Austin, from an historical viewpoint, from an artistic viewpoint, from a cultural viewpoint. The fact that we have a number of buildings that are in the National Register of Historic places here in East Austin, including 2 on the campus of Houston-Tillotson University now. Also, I know I'm going over, but I certainly want people to know about that. I want folks to know about the contributions that African Americans have made to music. We know about Johnny Holmes at the Victory Grill, also Levada Durst, known as the Gray Ghost. So many other people. Levada Durst was also a play-by-play announcer for the Austin Black Senators. Later became an ordained minister. That the oldest, I think it is still the oldest gospel radio program in the nation started here in Austin. Also, a gospel time hosted by Mr. Elmer Akins. His son became a noted educator. There's a school named for his son. Just so many little things like that we've been an incubator. We've also been very, very an integral part of the civil rights struggle, because after all, Heman Sweat versus Painter, that started here in Austin. Heman, Marion Sweat, and suing the University of Texas for admission to UT. A young man came down from the NAACP's offices in order to strategize with Heman Sweat, strategize on his case, and strategize with other Black leaders in Austin about desegregating Austin. That man was Thurgood Marshall. Yeah. And the Sweat versus Painter case, which opened the University of Texas, was also was a template for the Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954. I want people to know little things about that. And now the Travis County Courthouse downtown at West 10th and Guadalupe, where Heman Sweat's case was first heard and turned down, is now the Heman Marion Sweat Travis County Courthouse. Just to name a few things, and the role that Black women have played and continue to play in the backbone of the community, the African American community, and the community itself. And I want to speak more on that at some point, but not
for
now.
sure. We're going to do this again. So we're going to be doing this every other week. This is going to be sustainable programming, gentlemen. So do not feel as if this is going to be your last time participating in the pivot. So Javier, I have to give you a second or two just to be able to respond. But remember the criteria. You cannot do what Harrison did. You have to give us 1 or 2 facts, and then we have to move on to our musical segment.
I got you. Well, my fact. taking everything that Mr. Eppright said, I would like to share with the listening audience the fact about Mrs. Mahalia Murchison, often regarded as the first African person in Austin. Even though we know she's not, I still like to center her story and her narrative and give her humanity back, everything that was taken from her, and let people know that we are descendants of that woman. We are descendants of the violence inflicted on that woman, and we are part of the strength that she exemplified and continue to stay here in this city. So I would love for people to know that about Austin, Texas, is that we are Mahalia Murchison's children in this city. We are her descendants, whether we are blood relation or not.
Thank you so much for that. That was super, super important. I think that all those points couldn't be said any better, gentlemen. You both did a great job at really telling just a portion of Austin's history, and hopefully people understand that this is just the gateway to help, perk their ears up and make them interested about wanting to do some research on some of the names that were mentioned. I do want to also say or give you all the opportunity just to tell people how they can find you, so how they can kind of reach out and participate either in your tours or even read certain articles about you. I know, Harrison, you just were recently published in the Austin American Statesman. I know, Javier, you do a lot of work through Instagram. So if you can, please just make mention of some of those articles or even vehicles in which you communicate with the community.
Go ahead.
Everybody can find me at blackaustintours.com or Black Austin Tours on Instagram. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Everything is there.
Well, I'm manager of visitor services and tour ambassador for Visit Austin, and specifically the Austin Visitor Center. So you can find me at my work website, email, which is Eppright. That's HEPPRIGHT at visitaustin.org. I'm also tour docent for Six Square. Or you can contact me on my home email, which is historyharry@hotmail.com. historyharry@hotmail.com.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for participating and just letting us kind of just talk about Austin from a more inclusive and equitable lens. It's been time well spent. So thank you both for participating.
Thank you. My pleasure. My pleasure.
And look forward to coming back, right?
All right. Yes. Anytime.
Awesome. Well, now we're going to go to our musical segment. So I want to welcome Anastasia of Anastasia and the Heroes.
Good evening, TJ. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Thank you for taking time out of your day. This has been an exciting hour so far, and we know that what you're going to provide is just going to take us over the top. So if you don't mind, just talk about your new project overall and kind of what went into how you really composed some of these songs.
Wow. Okay. Well, I am releasing a project late spring, early summer. Okay. I have yet to name it, but it's been in the works for a while. For me, messages, concepts are really big. So really, it's just about me wanting to say things that people need to hear in a different sort of artistic way. For instance, one of the songs we might hear tonight is called Clarity. And, it was really just about, okay, dope. Yeah. So, Clarity I wrote, it became relevant as we moved into 2020. Because I think clarity is something that we all wish for, something we all seek after all the time. And then I decided to take that concept and create a metaphor wherein I describe clarity as a woman. And I thought there's no better way to do that, because, when you think about the women in your life, your mother, your sister, your wife, your girlfriend, those are the people that keep it real with you. Those are the people that you go to for advice, and you know that they're going to be honest. So really, it's just about me taking those things that mean something to me and painting a picture for my audience.
No, thank you for that narrative. I know one thing for me that was really gratifying by listening to your music is the level of musicality that you have within your music. And it's really this kind of fusion where you kind of rapping, you're kind of singing, but the live instrumentation really takes it to another level. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the first song, Clarity.
Great.
I feel like now more than ever, doesn't always come easy, you know? Sometimes you're just waiting for that breakthrough. Sometimes if you just ask nicely, yeah. She's pretty like a flower. She's honestly all that you need. She looking better by the hour. Whatever it is, whatever it be. Tell her you're cool with how she works. You prefer when she come direct. Tell her you ready to put her first. And show her nothing but respect. She love it when you see right through her. She the one you couldn't lie to her. She know where you've been coming from. Tell her there ain't nothing like her. Try to keep her when you find her. Pay attention to the signs that'll open up your mind though. What you thought? She the truth right now. What goes on in the dark? Know she soon find out. Will you fall for the ride? Will you fall for her? She don't change, she gon' stay down. Hey. Ask nice though. Tell her she pretty like a flower. Tell her she's honestly everything. Tell her she's real by the hour. You feel where she coming from? She don't want to been about it. Tell her she pretty. Clarity, la la la, light from the sun. Clarity for the mind. Come on through, yeah. Clarity. Hey, she pretty like a flower. Her honesty's all that you need. She get it right, she know her power. You're not a believer, she'll make you see. Tell her you love the way she shine. You prefer when she take the lead. Tell her you ride with her every time. She come with the answer, she set you free. She love it when you see right through her. She the one you couldn't lie to her. She know where you've been coming from. Tell her there ain't nothing like her. Try to keep her when you find her. Pay attention to the signs that'll open up your mind, though. What you thought? She the truth right now. What goes on in the dark? Know she soon find out. Will you fall for the world? Yeah. She don't change, she gon' stay down. La la la, light from the sun. Clarity for the mind. Come on through, yeah. Clarity. Come on through now, clarity. Hey, clarity. Look, hey. Isn't she lovely now? Isn't she bad? If you ever lose her, run. Go get her back. Go get her back. You need a back. You need a bag. We all do. One thing though. Tell her she's pretty like a flower. Tell her she's honestly everything. Tell her she's real by the hour. You feel where she coming from? She the one and then about it. Tell her she's pretty. Clarity. Light from the sun. Yeah. Clarity for the mind. Come on through. Yeah. Hey. Clarity. Yes, we could all use it. This is Anastasia and the Heroes. I'm gonna keep this thing moving. dedication real quick?
All right, there you go. Clarity, right? On so many different levels. No, I love that song. Thank you for putting that out there for us. I think you're absolutely correct. So many people try to find clarity and kind of placing it in different places. So I love the way you kind of brought that metaphor home. Great. So this next song has probably one of the most interesting titles of them all.
Right?
Big Tuna, right?
Big
Tuna.
Tuna.
Talk a little bit about Big Tuna and maybe kind of what was your inspiration behind it? And maybe since it is another metaphor, maybe it makes sense for us before we get into the song.
Okay. So, another topic that I feel like a lot of artists can relate to and try to convey in their work is feeling like a big fish in a small pond, feeling like, you're meant for bigger things and better things. But of course I can't just say I feel like a big fish in a small pond. And, I remember reading about, these Japanese businessmen that pay these millions of dollars for a fish, a tuna, and when you hear tuna, you might think of like I say in the song, stuff in the can, but that's not what we're talking about. No. We're talking about something you can't even imagine. You know what I mean? Why would anybody pay millions of dollars, for a simple fish? So it's really just me wanting to paint that picture, just to make people think about it in a different way. It's really about taking up space in a good way, feeling myself, feeling yourself, confidence. And that's what I hope people, I tried to make it, I kind of stepped out on this one. I made it a little flossier, right now I'm conceptualizing a visual to go along with it. And, like I say in the lyrics, I'm about to swing out wide in the intersection. Like I said, it's about making noise for positive. So that's Big Tuna in a nutshell. In a can.
Yeah, no, I understand exactly where you're coming from. And so without any further ado, let's get into it. Big Tuna.
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome. This is Anastasia and the Heroes. I'm gonna do a few songs for y'all. We're gonna start right here. I could never comprehend little ponds, how you swim. I'm infatuated with the life. I belong in the pond where the stars get it on. I've been waiting for my time. Real big facts. Look, she might find that I don't fit in, cause I went got big fat. Hey, eating good in the waters where the sharks get it in. About to swing out wide in the intersection. Glide by, knocking pictures off the wall. Big Tuna, roam around where she like it, get interested. Not about to miss a meal, not at all. I can never comprehend little ponds, how you swim. I'm infatuated with the life. I belong in the pond where the stars get it on. I've been waiting for my time. Flags, big energy. Big Tuna flags, big energy. Big Tuna flags, big energy. Big. Hey, Big Tuna, not the stuff in the can now. Uncloud, unbound, living free. About to go to stain, rolling off in the sea. Yeah. Real big facts. Look, 'cause she finna hear all about as well. I'm infatuated with the life. You know that sweet life? Big energy. All right.
I like it.
Thank
I like
you.
it, right?
Glad you like
I know you get that response all the time. I know you get that a lot. So just keep on doing what you're doing. But
I
we have
will.
one more song, and we're gonna talk about Kale, right?
Actually, the full title is Kale and Yoga.
Okay.
Yeah, but
So
again, another metaphor.
for sure. Well, talk about maybe what was the inspiration behind it. Sometimes you can kind of hear something, or
Right.
it can kind of send you in so many different directions. So was there maybe a story that was attached to this song?
Well, that's a good question. I think that I wrote this song and this project back in 2014. I was going through a sort of transitional phase in my life and thinking about, because as a rap artist, you have to evolve. Your craft has to evolve right along with you. I don't want to rap about what I did 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I want to rap about my life. And, when I think about applying my life to my music, how I keep myself happy, how I keep myself balanced, what's important to me. And those were the things that came to mind. And then I thought about, okay, kale, green, cabbage, lettuce, money. Okay, that's important, yoga, your power, your balance, your stability. So I figured, I just put that in a nice little package, and that's where kale and yoga came from.
Great. Well, let's get into it. I think you really made that go full circle. So let's get into it.
Okay.
Once again, this is Anastasia and the Heroes. And like we usually do, I want to present to you my philosophy, my life philosophy, my recipe. For life, for love. Growing my care, practicing my yoga like it's money and power. Money and power. Growing my care, practicing my yoga like it's money and power. Money and power. Growing my care, practicing my yoga. Growing my care, practicing my yoga. Growing my care, practicing my yoga. One day I'll be, been on this walk every day for no real reason other than better weather, but it's that every other season. If you into waiting, it's wisdom and patience. It's only by hustle that I'm breathing. But listen, that's never been a dilemma. Look, I got places I'm trying to be in. Look, I got boys and they need their dinner. I remember when I didn't feel it. Different chick, different spirit. Nowadays, lip balm and I look calm and I kill it. I wrap my mind around a lot, hundreds of thousands of islands. I could either find me one or none. I think I could find me one tonight, because I'm clever with what I got. How about I've been growing my care, practicing my yoga, like it's money and power, maintaining my balance. Oh yeah. Growing my care, practicing my yoga, like it's money and power. Money and power. Growing my care, practicing my yoga. Growing my care, practicing my yoga. Growing my care, practicing my yoga. One day I'll be blowing this kale, mastering my yoga. Breathe. Yeah, breathe. In and out. Breathe. Inhale, exhale. Breathe. Physical balance, your bank balance, your emotional balance, keeping it right where it needs to be. practicing my yoga like it's money and power. Money and power. Growing my career, practicing my yoga. Growing my career, practicing my yoga. Growing my career, practicing my yoga.
All right. Well, I'm ready to download the whole entire project already.
Nice.
I know you mentioned before that you've been performing some of these tracks for a long time now. So tell people where they can kind of find, your work. If it's just, Spotify ready, or if you have any online performances coming up, let people know they can tap into it.
Yeah, you know what? I've got music all over the internet. So if you go to Spotify, Apple Music, search for Anastasia. You might want to search for my name and the title of the song, because there are so many Anastasias, which incidentally is why I changed my artist name to Anastasia The Heroes. It makes me a little more distinctive. If you have YouTube, I'm always looking for YouTube subscribers, and that's where all of my new material is going. I think, my music is worthy of good visuals, so that's my go-to these days. So go to YouTube and look up Official Anya, subscribe, meet me there. Meet me on Instagram, Anastasia_Hera_. Like I always say, I love new fans. I love new friends, and especially people in my community. I like to work. I like to connect. I like to hear from them. The people that I grew up with and grew around, and from the city that I'm from, their feedback is important to me. As we are able to branch out and go bigger and reach more people, the people at home should be like family. So I'm always looking for that. Reach out.
Great. No, thank you for taking the time to jump on. Once again, thank you again, Anastasia Hera. Y'all make sure that you tap into everything that she has going on. Look her up on YouTube, Instagram, all the platforms that she just mentioned. So we want to thank you again for taking the time and joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Thank you. And also, I want to thank you all for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. We appreciate the support. Hopefully you all like what we're doing. If you'd like to give us some feedback, you can always reach out to us via our Facebook page. You also can email us at aachf@austintexas.gov. So we look forward to the continuous talks and communication. I do want to say one thing. I just want to try to ask you all to just continue to lean on each other. I know that so many people are still recovering from the events of the Arctic blast last week. So if you haven't heard from someone in a while, please just pick up the phone and just check on them and just have a conversation. Just kind of like the old days where sometimes you could just call someone and pick up the phone and just talk about nothing, right? You just want to check in on that individual, see how they're doing, things like, quarantine fatigue and depression and just people's mental state are at an all-time high. So, just check in on people all the way around. And like I said, once again, we appreciate you all for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Pivot.